We stand on the edge of an amazing technological shift. I'm not talking about the virtual fakery of virtual reality or even the oily petrochemical world of 3D printing. I'm talking about something far more natural, something far more remarkable. Imagine being able to manipulate matter. Imagine something as dinky and as twee as a Christmas tree that lights itself up. Now imagine something grander, like all street lighting in every suburb in Australia supplied by bioluminescent trees. Imagine not being limited by biology or by chemistry. Imagine being able to control and to instruct the properties of the physical world around us, the material. It gives you the power of a little God. What would you do with that? What could you do with that? You should start imagining that world because it's a lot closer than you think. In my world, which is marketing and technology, there's a great thirst for the next new thing. And there are conferences full of mostly men like me spouting forth on just such topics. And so a little while ago I was asked to speak on just such a topic at just such a conference. Talk to us about the next creative technologies. What's over the hill? What's coming? And what I found in my research is how limited the way we think about technology is. There's an industry that's built up around silicon, but it's not a technology industry, it's a computers industry. It's an industry where the technology stops whenever the silicon chips do. Silicon-based computing has captured the idea of technology, and yet the most exciting technological advances to come will be organic and chemical and human. Silicon Valley itself has captured the capital and the energy of the technology industry and the technology market. And yet the next waves of technology will come from far away, from the very edges of those worlds. Silicon culture will exhaust its limits. And then what will we be left with? We need to take technology off the grid to find its future. So the thing about technologies is that technologies aren't technologies forever. A technology is a description of a current state. There are many definitions of technology, but whatever it describes, it always describes a current state. Paper, radio, the plough, they're all technologies once, and now they're just tools. They're objects. They're things that sit within our daily existence. Another TED speaker, Ray Kurzweil, spoke at length about the pace of change in technology and how each new technology increases the speed of technological evolution. And what that means is that window, the current state window for each technology, gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And so silicon will exhaust its limits, and it will exhaust them sooner than we think. And then what will we be left with? Because the important legacies of technology is not the objects, not the material. It's what we do with them. It's what happens afterwards. Not paper, literature. Not celluloid, cinema. So what will the lasting legacy of silicon culture be? And where will it emerge? And the answer is in lots of places. always at the edges of things. In my research, I found a lab. And this lab was using discarded, and some would say discredited technology, electrothermal stimulation. Now, the last time this was in popular use was probably to treat the nervous conditions of Victorian ladies, and I mean Victorian era ladies. It's a 19th century technology. But in this lab, it was being programmed and controlled using code to start to synthesize and simulate taste, to be able to broadcast, in a sense, taste through electricity, through electromagnetism, the idea of lickable screens, the idea of being able to lick your phone, to send samples and trials to each other. Now, this team were obviously thinking about far more serious, far more practical things. Helping diabetics get their sugar hit without getting their sugar hit. And a range of other things, but I work in marketing, so I was thinking of 1,000 nefarious applications. In Perth, down on the bottom right there, you can see a whole bunch of test tube dolls. I found a lab where artists and biologists collaborate. And they collaborate using the medium of wet biology, culturing live tissue for the purposes of artistic and cultural practice. So those little test tubes down there are part of an exhibition that actually ran a couple of years ago. And one of those little ladies in the doll is called Semi-Living Doll G. And each of those is live cultured tissue. Created, given life for an exhibition, exhibited in an art gallery somewhere, and at the end of the exhibition, euthanized. Tissue culture is a technology, and it's a technology in this sense that is being explored not only for its material processes, for how it's made, for the process of how it's done, but also obviously to explore the ethics of this process. What I think is interesting here is this is not 3D printing a liver or the famous arm being replaced or any of those other applications which are absolutely necessary and worthy and usually the first things that people will think about in these cases. This is tissue culture as a technology being thought about and played with as a form of cultural practice, as artistic expression, and therefore ultimately as part of entertainment culture. In Europe, we found a boutique prototyping what we would call biofabrication, literally growing clothes to be worn. In this case, cellulose. Taking a technology, and again, a millennia-old technology, more akin to baking bread or brewing beer, culturing, to be able to grow textiles instead of manufacturing them. So instead of the giant pyramid of resource use, unsustainable resource use that sits behind every cotton t-shirt you wear, in this case the clothing is grown and to some extent could be grown to order. And in this case it is this ancient weird brewing technology being combined with a software programming, a code-based approach to be able to help to specifically instruct the shape of the material, the properties of the material, the weight of the material, its ability to change. This is a pretty revolutionary technology. This could be the end of manufacturing. In Singapore, we found a lab that were working on a prototype of a paper that animates itself, which is ironic. Talk about the death of paper and death of print and the death of publishing and being replaced by screens, and yet paper could be the next screen. And again, this millennia-old technology, in this case, being reborn through the use of code, through the use of software and thermal control, and just good old ink. Imagine the possibilities for that. In another lab in Boston, we found scientists working on programming cells to perform basic tasks at a cellular level. We also found them working on being able to program the properties of physical matter almost in a sense in real time. Working with a foam that at the flick of a program switch took on the properties of wood, stiff, hard, knockable, and then flick again, and the foam suddenly adopts the properties of leather, stretchy, smooth, round, and then flick again, and the program instructs the foam to take on the properties of paper, the weight, and the lightness, and the crackle. So not just genetics in that sense of evolutionary, but literally being able to program and instruct the properties of matter almost in real time. And that's the future. That's the next space. This is what's coming next, is the idea of programming matter, coding the world around us. It's the most profound and lasting impact of technologies. It's not the hardware. It won't be the computer chips. It won't be the phones. It won't be the computers themselves. The most profound and lasting impact of the digital revolution will be the expectation that it creates in us that the world around us should be as malleable and as programmable and as codable as the software that we write and that we use every day. It's the code mentality applied to organic or non-silicon or real-world experiences. That's what's coming. And what's interesting, at least for me, is that the processes and the practices look very much like the everyday work of a software developer, only with a twist. Biology and chemistry. So much as we hear calls to teach our daughters to code, and that they're important calls. You know, it's part of a digital literacy movement which will help people navigate the world ahead. Equally important will be the idea of a sound basis in biology and in chemistry for this world. And if you're a working professional, it won't just be a working knowledge of the most popular codes of the day, of Ruby and Python and Cell. It could be a working knowledge of genomic sequencing and cellular programming. Will be equally important. And that world should be exciting to us because in many ways, silicon-based culture disables us. Computers and phones require us to remove ourselves from the flow of life to interact with them. Programming matter lets us put the technology back into the physical world, into the world we naturally interact with. So this future that's coming, it's an exciting future. It's a much wilder, more natural future. But it raises some profound questions. And questions, I think, that are to be engaged with by more than just a technical and scientific elite. What does the end of manufacturing mean for employment and social stability, particularly in the developed world? What does the end of scarcity mean for economics, if we can grow what we need? What does the end of the limits of biology and the body mean for identity, for race, for culture, for spirituality? How do you educate for a future like that? And do we even have the right to coerce living matter? These are the kind of questions that we need to be engaging with, because they're social questions, cultural questions, ethical questions. And not for a world that is 100 years away, not for a world that's 50 years away, for a world that's coming a lot sooner than we think. These are questions that we should be engaging with now, today. Thank you for listening.